China's growing influence in Latin America. China's role in Latin America and the Caribbean has grown rapidly since the early 2000s. It promises economic opportunities, but also raises concerns about Beijing's influence. Chinese state firms have become major investors in energy, infrastructure, and space industries across the region. China has even surpassed the United States as South America's largest trading partner. In addition, Beijing has expanded its cultural, diplomatic, and military presence throughout Latin America. A notable example is the opening of a new megaport in Peru, part of China's Global Belt and Road Initiative. However, the United States and its allies worry that China's growing presence is more than economic. They suspect Beijing is using these relationships to isolate Taiwan and support authoritarian regimes in countries like Cuba and Venezuela. U.S. President Joe Biden referred to China as a strategic competitor in the region. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump has proposed stronger trade measures, potentially setting the stage for a more confrontational U.S. approach in the hemisphere. Historical ties. China's connections with Latin America date back to the 16th century. The Manila Galleon trade route enabled the exchange of porcelain, silk, and spices between China and Mexico. By the 1840s, hundreds of thousands of Chinese immigrants worked as indentured servants in places like Cuba and Peru, often in sugar plantations and silver mines. However, for much of the 20th century, China's ties with the region were limited due to its domestic challenges. Stronger bonds began forming after China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001. Today, countries like Brazil, Cuba, Paraguay, Peru, and Venezuela host large Chinese diaspora communities, fostering robust cultural and economic connections. Economic relations. In 2000, China accounted for less than 2% of Latin America's exports. By 2021, trade exceeded a record $450 billion, and projections suggest it could surpass $700 billion by 2035. Latin America mainly exports soybeans, copper, petroleum, and other raw materials to China. In return, it imports high-value manufactured goods. While trade has benefited the region, some experts warn that cheaper Chinese imports harm local industries. China has also signed free trade agreements with countries like Chile, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Peru. Additionally, 22 Latin American and Caribbean nations have joined China's Belt and Road Initiative. Chinese loans and investments are significant, with Venezuela being the largest borrower, receiving nearly $60 billion in loans, mainly for energy and infrastructure projects. Concerns over dependency. Despite the economic benefits, dependence on Chinese loans has raised concerns. Some countries, like Venezuela, risk falling into debt traps. Critics also warn of China's lower environmental and labor standards. For example, in 2022, 39% of Chile's exports went to China, sparking fears of economic over-reliance. Political and security interests. China has also sought to expand its political influence through South-South cooperation, focusing on trade, investment, and aid. High-level political exchanges have increased significantly, with President Xi Jinping visiting the region multiple times. China has also sought to isolate Taiwan, with only a handful of Latin American and Caribbean countries still recognizing Taiwan's sovereignty. In terms of security, China has sold military hardware to countries like Venezuela, Argentina, and Ecuador. It has also engaged in military training and provided equipment to local law enforcement across the region. Bilateral cooperation. China's investments in Latin America include large-scale energy projects, particularly in lithium-rich regions like Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. It has also contributed to renewable energy projects, such as solar plants in Argentina and wind farms in Chile. During the COVID-19 pandemic, China donated medical supplies and vaccines to many Latin American countries. This not only improved China's image, but also strengthened ties. Additionally, Chinese companies are involved in major infrastructure projects, including ports, highways, and railways. Conclusion. China's growing influence in Latin America is reshaping the region's economic and political landscape. While the opportunities are significant, the challenges, such as debt dependency, environmental concerns, and political influence, cannot be ignored. As China deepens its presence, the dynamics between Beijing, Latin America, and other global powers will continue to evolve.